2011-2012 legislative session. As you know, today we'll be hearing two-year Senate bills. The deadline for policy committees to report out is this Friday, and the deadline for getting the bills out is January 31st. I do want to note today that our very good colleague, Senator Calderon, will not be with us today. He just suffered a very great loss in his family, and our thoughts are with him at this time. Today we'll be considering 6 measures because 2 of the measures have been pulled from the calendar. Item number 5, SB 492 by Senator Correa, and item number 7, SB 700 by Senator LaMalfa. So we'll be hearing 6 measures. One of them is a ROCA bill, and I want to reiterate that the committee will be continuing our ROCA policy this year. The policy began in 2007. Since then, we've held bills in committee that expand felonies because of the overcrowding crisis in the state. The baseline number, of course, was 180% of prison capacity. And last year, the United States Supreme Court upheld a lower court's order directing us to reduce the prison population by at least 34,000 prisoners in 2 years. Now, the good news is we've made progress. CDCR announced last week that they've cut prison overcrowding by about 11,000 in this last period of time. We still, however, are going to have 23,000 to go. And also, when we complete the 34,000 reduction in the prison population, we will still be 130% of the capacity of our prisons. Now, I've visited these prisons, many of us have. We know what the double bunking in the gym does in terms of prison safety, both for incarcerated people and for the people that supervise them. And we know why we have to change that. So we don't want to simply have a revolving door here, so we're maintaining the ROCA policy. The way this works is members can ask for a vote on their ROCA bills at the end. I will be asking members to vote no on that, not because of any of the policy necessarily, but because we need to straighten out our sentencing system before we add more people to the prison rolls. And if there's something that's so important that we really do need to adopt it, we ought to be looking at other ways of reducing the prison population. In fact, it's my hope that this year we'll be able to focus the committee's work on some of the very substantive areas in front of us, like realignment, like looking at sentencing, and looking at how these things interact and reinforce each other. So welcome to the committee. Thank you so much for being here. We do have a quorum, so I will ask the secretary to take the roll.
Hancock?
Here.
Hancock here. Anderson?
Here.
Anderson here. Calderon? Harmon?
Here.
Harmon here. Liu? Liu here. Price? Here. Price here. Steinberg?
Okay. We've established a quorum, and welcome Senator Correa to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to you and honorable senators. I'd like to begin with Senate Bill 313, if I may. This bill will allow commemorative handguns and used handguns manufactured before the passage of the Unsafe Handguns Act of January 1st, 2000 to be sold by licensed firearm dealers. The Unsafe Handgun Act requires the Department of Justice to test handgun safety and maintain a roster of safe guns. This law prohibits licensed and registered California firearm dealers from legally reselling certain used or unique firearms which are deemed unsafe. This is the issue. Yet these transfers are still legal between private parties. Let me repeat. The Unsafe Handgun Act of 2000 prohibits licensed and registered firearms dealers from legally reselling these firearms, yet it is legal for these transfers to happen between private parties. The result is, of course, the creation today of an underground market for used handguns. What this bill seeks to do is not to repeal the provisions of this Unsafe Handgun Act, but rather to make common sense changes to this existing law. The measure promotes gun safety and transparency by incentivizing the transfer and sale of used guns by certain licensed firearm dealers. Let me also say that due to a drafting error, the bill unintentionally struck out subdivision J of the Penal Code. I'm going to accept it as an author's amendment to fix this error. Let me conclude by saying that this bill is supported by law enforcement officers across the state. And joining me today, I have two witnesses, Mr. Tom Penderson with the California Rifle and Pistol Association, and Mr. Ed Worley representing the National Rifle Association. And they can answer any questions the committee may have.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Ed Worley with the National Rifle Association. Today, what we're talking about is very strange, what I call anomaly in the law. The way Senate Bill 15 is structured is the only firearms that a licensed dealer is allowed to sell from their own inventory are firearms that are so-called tested as not being unsafe. That's what the statute says. But if you and I walk into the firearms dealer and I have a firearm that's not on the roster of firearms, the firearms dealer is required by law to do the transfer. So some people who oppose the bill say, well, these guns are banned. They cannot be sold. That's totally, completely not factual. These firearms are not banned for sale. They're not banned for possession. They're not banned for being sold. The weird anomaly is that every person in the state of California can buy and sell these handguns except for the licensed firearm dealer. The one person the state of California has licenses on, the one person that the federal government licenses, is the only person who cannot sell them from their own inventory. The way we've structured the bill is that there are a lot of firearms that were manufactured and are not being manufactured anymore. So working with Senator Correa's office, what we've done is there's thousands of different makes and models of handguns that were manufactured and ceased production before Senate Bill 15 took place. Well, those firearms cannot be submitted to the Department of Justice to be tested because statute requires that the only organization that can submit handguns to be tested by the state laboratories are the manufacturers themselves. So what you have is you have tens of thousands of different handguns out there that are being bought and sold by people through dealers, but the dealers themselves cannot sell them, which I think is a strange anomaly. You have a lot of different collectors' firearms. For instance, in World War II, Singer Sewing Machine made handguns during the war because everybody was helping out during the war. Well, I highly doubt Singer Sewing Machine is going to go out and take 3 handguns and submit it to the Department of Justice for testing so they could be put on the roster. The other thing that the statute requires is every year, if a firearm is on the roster, the manufacturer must pay a fee every year to keep the firearms on the roster. Well, there's no incentive for companies that out there that no longer manufacture firearms to keep those firearms on the roster. So what you have is you have this weird situation to where the stocking gun dealer, who is licensed and regulated and audited by the state and federal law enforcement authorities, is the only person who cannot buy and sell the gun in their own inventory. So what we're looking for in the bill is very simple, that if the firearm was manufactured and ceased production before SB 15 took place, those firearms should be grandfathered in and allowed to be sold by the dealers and out of their own inventory.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Tom Pedersen, representing California Rifle and Pistol Association. As the Senator stated, this is a narrowly crafted bill. It's a very common sense bill. It's designed to correct what I would consider to be an unintended consequence of the original legislation. I'd just like to give you a couple examples. For example, it was mentioned earlier there are licensed gun dealers. They're licensed by the federal government as well as the Department of Justice. In the case of pawnbrokers, they're generally a licensed gun dealer. Unfortunately, a pawnbroker cannot purchase a firearm from an individual that walks into the store that happens to be not on that list. So you may have what I would consider to be a quality firearm, a Colt Woodsman that was manufactured in the 40s. The only reason Colt quit making them was because they were too expensive to manufacture and do hand fitting. So the person walks in, tries to sell this to the pawnbroker, and have a mechanism whereby they can legally transfer the gun to someone that's not a prohibited person. Under the scenario we have now, they can't do that. They have to walk out the door with that firearm. And as the Senator mentioned, there's a number of scenarios that could occur. And the most important thing is to make sure that if we're going to have a highly regulated product in California, which firearms are, that there be a mechanism for individuals to transfer those. Considering that that same firearm could be transferred between two private parties, but that won't happen at a pawnbroker shop. And in this economy, you're going to have individuals that are in dire straits and are selling, their possessions, and one of them may be a firearm, a handgun. The other example that was mentioned earlier, Mr. Worley mentioned that there are firearms that were manufactured by Singer Sewing Machine, International Harvester. They're a standard military-type Colt that's also manufactured for civilian use. They're used as target pistols and for hunting. The problem is, as he mentioned, they're not manufactured anymore. So you could have a scenario where you have a widow, the husband is deceased, maybe he collected these handguns over a period of years, and he might have very valuable handguns that were collected over a period of 30 or 40 years. She cannot sell those directly to a dealer. She has no mechanism to dispose of them. And usually in an estate situation, you don't have a choice of picking and choosing which ones you sell. In an estate situation, the estate has to sell the whole batch. So they're left with a serious problem and they're unable to resolve it. So all we ask is your support to try to rectify a situation that I think would be better for everyone. Thank you.
Me too's.
Good morning and Happy New Year, Madam Chair and members. It's good to be back. Sam Paredes, representing Gun Owners of California. I've also been authorized to speak on behalf of the Safari Club International, National Shooting Sports Foundation, California Association of Firearms Retailers, in support of this bill. And there is even, this is one bill where we're truly talking about good government. There's a situation where dealers may have purchased guns legally that were on the roster, even though they were manufactured prior to 1992, and they have them in their inventory, and for whatever reason a manufacturer drops the registration on that, and now dealers are stuck with a firearm that they cannot sell in their inventory. They complied with all aspects of the law, and their commerce is being impacted. So, folks, this is really a pretty non-controversial and good government bill that kind of repairs an inequity. Everything is still registered. Everything still goes through the process, and we ask that you would support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others in support of the bill? Are there speakers in opposition to the bill? Please come forward. If you could make room at the table, I think there are two people coming up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Ben Van Houten on behalf of Legal Community Against Violence. In strong opposition to this bill, in many ways, the issues that are being discussed here today were already considered by the legislature in the adoption of the Unsafe Handgun Act, and it just seems strange to revisit them both after so many years and after they had already been considered. It is strange to me the idea of approaching correcting anomalies in the law by exploding out the gaps to allow really major changes in and weaken the unsafe handgun law. Really what we're talking about here is allowing dealers to sell guns that have not been certified and have not passed the unsafe handgun requirements. And it doesn't seem to me like a good idea to increase the number of handguns that have not been certified safe in the commercial marketplace and available to consumers. Again, these issues were already considered in the adoption of the Unsafe Handgun Act, and we shouldn't. There's no need to revisit them today.
Thank you.
Karen Arnson here on behalf of the California chapters of the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. We urge you to oppose this bill. The Unsafe Handgun Act, passed in 1999, was primarily to rid our streets of junk guns, and it has been very successful in doing this. This would allow dealers to resell potentially unsafe handguns. It would have the opposite effect of what SB 15 was intended to do, and it would weaken the Unsafe Handgun Act. We ask for your no vote on this.
Thank you. Are there other speakers in opposition? Seeing and hearing none, are there comments or questions from members of the committee? No comments or questions from members of the committee. Is there a motion on the bill?
Madam Chair, I'd like to close.
Of course, I'm sorry. This
That's
is the
okay, Madam Chair.
first bill, first hearing of
Thank
the
you,
year.
Madam
Senator Correa, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to point out to the members of the committee that I was actually here when this bill was actually debated. And this, I can tell you, this anomaly, when I voted on this measure, this was and is clearly an unintended consequence. This was not envisioned by this bill when it was being debated in the year 1999-2000. Law enforcement are exempt by the law, and they can actually purchase these weapons from the dealers right now. And I can tell you that if I went back and looked at the records, I can probably think as to why that exemption was put there. It was put there to make sure that we moved away from what has actually happened, which is a black market has been created between private parties. So again, let me state, this was not the intended purpose of the bill back in 2000 when I was here in the legislature. Again, what we're trying to do is get rid of this black market that has been unintentionally created. I ask for an aye vote.
Okay. We'll have a vote on the bill. Senator Correa, I do have to say that I will not be able to support your bill today. The discussion about the widow with the gun collection, I mean, maybe there's an exemption that would deal with that, but I would note that current exemptions to the handgun safety requirements are curios and relics and guns that had limited production or are custom made. And to go further, to delete, make yet another exemption to the safety requirements in existing law. Coming from the district I represent, where people are so frequently killed on the streets of their community, and I know your bill is aimed at something quite different, but I will not be able to support your bill today. If there are no other comments or questions, if the Secretary would read the roll.
Do you pass as amended?
I thought I heard Senator Harman make a motion. Just didn't have a comment.
Yes, it's do pass as amended. Hancock?
No.
Hancock, no. Anderson? Calderon? Harman?
Aye.
Harman, aye. Liu?
No.
Liu, no. Price?
No.
Price, no. Steinberg?
The measure will be on call.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the committee.
You do have another measure, Senator Correa, SB
Yes.
329.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senators. This measure deals with DNA, and as all of us know, DNA is a very powerful tool. It has served to both exonerate some of the wrongly convicted, as well as to apprehend some of the most vicious criminals in our society, namely those that have perpetuated sexual crimes. Let me report to you today that California, again, leads the nation in another category, and that category is we have the largest backlog of unprocessed DNA samples from murderers, rapists, and other criminals in the nation. This valuable evidence today sits around in evidence lockers throughout the state unprocessed. What this bill seeks to address is this backlog. And what we're trying to do is figure out how to analyze these samples of biological evidence from crime scenes throughout the state. Madam Chair, you and I have discussed this issue at great length, and we both agree that a solution is necessary. Yet this is a solution that touches not only on funding, but it also touches on the shortage of trained personnel to do the processing, as well as changes to existing laws that may actually be creating unintended barriers to processing these kids. And Madam Chair, as we discussed, what I will do today is I will essentially leave this bill in this committee with the understanding that we will have this committee, and I should say, will have an extensive hearing on this most important issue in the next few weeks and incorporate those findings into this bill and then move it forward. So with that understanding in mind, I will, through the chair, keep this committee in your bill today.
Keep the bill in committee.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I thank Senator Correa very much for this. We did have several long conversations about the problem and what the best thing is to do to solve the problem. Let me just say, I am extremely interested in having a hearing that will inform us about what is going on in the state, in all parts of the state, because it differs in different counties, with DNA testing, and what the barriers are to speedy and effective DNA testing, because it is a very important law enforcement tool. And once we agree, yes, we'll try to move the bill forward. But right.
Madam Chair, can I conclude with a just very brief statement? Or,
yeah, but I wanted to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But
go ahead.
Then I'll continue mine after yours, or do you want to have the last word?
You finish. You're the chair.
Okay. What I was going to say is that we identified, Senator Correa and I, a number of possible things. And one of the issues, I think, with his bill as it currently stands is that it seeks to increase fines on people who have not paid their previous fines. Now, the governor has already vetoed several fine increases like this because, as a matter of fact, when you get a fine now, it is actually 280% of its face value because of all the add-ons that have come exactly like this for good causes. So we either need to find some other source of funding, or we're hearing that some counties have the money, but they don't have the facilities or the personnel to do the testing. Well, if they have the money, one of our questions, Senator Correa's and mine, is what is our education system doing to produce the people who can actually go and do this work? And maybe we need to do some career technical education, Senator Lieu and Senator Price, because I know you're both interested in that. But I'm sure we can find a solution if we sit down and work together. And I just appreciate Senator Correa's leadership in bringing this forward and eagerness to engage with the committee so that we solve this problem.
May I?
Yes,
Thank you.
may, please.
That prior discussion about that year 2000, 99-2000, reminded me of another bill I carried then when Senator Vasconcellos was the chair of this committee, and that bill dealt with the DNA statute limitations. Before the year 2000, before the bill that I carried, the statute limitations on sex crimes was 6 years, and the public policy behind 6 years was that for more than 100 years, it was believed that after 6 years, women primarily that had been sexually assaulted, raped, and what have you, the thought was after 6 years, women could not remember enough to be credible witnesses. Therefore, you had a 6-year statute of limitations. After the work we did in Vasconcellos' committee, it took us 3 years, but the result of that work was that we were able to, in that bill, say that if you had DNA evidence that was properly processed within a specific time period, and again, if we don't process this DNA in time, then and may not be valid in a court of law, then there was effectively no statute of limitations. But my point is, it takes you a little bit of time to come up with these solutions to these problems. But again, DNA is a very powerful tool. You talked earlier about prison overcrowding, and I think DNA properly managed and effectively used will go after those perpetrators that should be behind bars, and possibly those that are innocent will be exonerated. But again, we've got to get this evidence processed in a timely manner. So I'm looking forward to working with this committee and other interested parties to come up with a win-win solution.
Thank you very much. I totally agree with
Thank you, Madam Chair.
everything you said. Thank you very much, Senator Correa. Right. So we now we need Senator LaMalfa or Senator Liu or Senator De Leon. While we're waiting, I think I could present my bill. That would be. Okay.
Yes. Pass this gavel down to Senator Harmon. Item 1.
Oh, Senator Harmon, why don't you chair? Senator Anderson.
I've got the duty, it looks like.
Not with us.
So, Senator Hancock, you want to present item number 1, SB 210, please.
I do. Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Harmon. Members of the committee, SB 210 would expand the eligibility for the Community Prisoner and Mothers Program to allow participation by an individual who's been convicted of violations involving marijuana. Under the jurisdiction now of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, the Community Prisoner and Mothers Program provides an alternative to state prison for incarcerated mothers with children under 6 or pregnant women. Incarcerated mothers then serve their prison time with their young children in a community-based facility and receive rehabilitation services to help them successfully transition back into the community. The program has been shown to be effective. Women who participate in this program have a 16 to 25% lower recidivism rate, and as you all know, in a state with a 70% recidivism rate right now, that matters. Every single case of recidivism that we do not have to deal with means $49,000 a year for the adult, and in this case means that we also are not placing these young children in our foster care system, which is another case of a system on the brink of failure, which so often leads right back to prison for those children when they grow up. So we would save a large amount of the taxpayers' money and without any cost to public safety whatsoever. At this point, many women are disqualified because of convictions regarding marijuana, but they otherwise meet the eligibility criteria, which are quite extensive. Everything from being a, as they say, non, to good behavior, to attitude toward CDCR has the ultimate decision-making power over who is eligible for the program. So it's simply not to exclude women with marijuana, minor marijuana offenses. And Senator Anderson mentioned to me, as we were talking about the bill earlier, that CDCR is currently slated to eliminate the program. I just want members of the committee to know that we have talked with them. They are very interested in working with the committee to continue the program because they realize that with realignment it's going to be important to have these alternatives to incarceration. And also, we're going to look at merging the program with another program called the Family Foundations Program, which is quite similar. And if we do that, we think we'll get economies, and it should be a win-win. So we just want, at this point, to make this slight expansion of eligibility. And I would ask for your aye vote. And with me to testify is Carol Strickman from Legal Services for Prisoners with Children.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are.
All right. Good morning. Yes, my name is Carol Strickman. I'm a staff attorney with Legal Services for Prisoners with Children. And LSPC is a nonprofit organization based in San Francisco that has a history of over 30 years of being concerned with incarceration issues, particularly related to parents. And we've been involved with the California's Mother-Infant Program since its inception. And we've followed carefully what's been going on in these programs. And back in November of 2010, we issued a report, which I brought up. You can find it on our website, but it's called California Mother-Infant Prison Programs and Investigation. I personally was involved with our policy director, our current policy director, in going to all 6 at that time of these programs, visiting them throughout the state, meeting with the prisoners, meeting with staff, getting a tour, and so on. And we wrote a pretty extensive report showing the pros and cons. We feel generally that we wish all these women didn't need to be in a prison setting, prefer more community-based than this is program, but we certainly support these programs continuing and expanding for those women who are not deemed appropriate for, staying in their own homes, let's say. So, and that's why, we're here today. We're interested in keeping these programs alive and expanding them, and for a lot of reasons. In particular, we believe that just because a woman has a criminal conviction doesn't mean she's a bad mother, that losing your child is an extreme punishment for crime, and that in reality is what happens to many of these families because of the some of the laws we have now about termination of parental rights, which can be rapid. And we don't think that that's good for the children in most cases. We don't think it's good for the mothers, and it's not good for the community. And so that's why, and all of these, as we did find some what we would call flaws, or things that could be improved in the current programs. But to a woman, there wasn't a single woman who didn't want us to support the existence and expansion of these programs. And they're so grateful that they exist. And it's just, I can't tell you how important these programs are for women in our state. As the Senator said, these programs do allow mothers to retain custody of their children, and it's a structured environment. It's a safe environment. I think they all have daycare, of child care, on-site services that are oftentimes managed by someone from Project Head Start. Women learn and work in those programs, so there's a way that they're sort of on the job. There's sort of job training, parenting skills that come with it. And there are more treatment and rehabilitative services available in these programs and currently in our state prison system today. With the result of a reduced rate of recidivism and a less cost to the state. So we think this is a good first step to expand the program in this way. We'd like to see some additional expansion, and we do urge you to support it. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Are there other witnesses in support? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ignacio Hernandez on behalf of the California Attorneys for Criminal Justice in support of the bill for the reasons already stated.
All right. Thank you very much. Other witnesses in support, please come forward.
Good morning. Glenn Backus for Drug Policy Alliance in support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? How about witnesses in opposition? Any testimony in opposition? Seeing none, are there questions or comments from committee members? Senator Anderson?
I'd like to move the bill.
Bill's been moved by Senator Anderson. Looks like there's no questions or comments from the committee.
There
is one. Thank you,
Mr.
Senator
Chairman, I
Price.
just wanted to applaud the author on her work with this vulnerable population. And I think, obviously, this certainly is consistent with the governor's efforts to transition, if possible, corrections efforts to the community. And I think this is an excellent way to make that happen. So,
Thank you.
Support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Harman. I just wanted to add a word of support to this program as someone who has visited some of these programs. It is very productive to try to keep our folks rehabilitated in something that's very, very constructive as opposed to just incarceration. So I, too, will be supporting this program, or this bill.
Okay, thank you. Senator Hancock, would you like to close?
I would ask for your aye vote.
All right, good. Secretary, call the roll, please.
Hancock?
Aye.
Hancock, aye. Anderson?
Aye.
Anderson, aye. Calderon? Harmon?
Aye.
Harmon, aye. Liu? Liu, aye. Price?
Aye.
Price, aye. Steinberg?
Okay. We'll leave that on call until other members are available to vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6 on the video.
And what about?
Senator Liu.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Senators. This bill protects grieving families from disruptive funeral protests by restricting protests within 500 feet of a funeral, beginning 1 hour prior to and ending 1 hour after the conclusion of a funeral. This bill is similar to a measure that received bipartisan support last year, but was ultimately vetoed by the governor. We have revised the bill to address the governor's concerns. The original bill had a 1,000-foot buffer zone. We cut that in half, and now it's 500 feet. It is in line with bills that Congress has introduced. Currently, over 40 other states and the federal government place reasonable restrictions on protesting at funerals, and this bill seeks to do the same. And I have witnesses here in support. This bill is supported by the American Legion, AMVETS, Vietnam Veterans of America, ALADS, the Riverside Sheriff's Association, and other organizations. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members. We're back again. However, the bill has been significantly changed, and I want to compliment the consultant on his good job on his analysis. We all know the purpose of the bill. It's to...
Would you just say who you are and who you're representing for the people who don't know?
Oh, I'm sorry. My fault. Today, I am representing the California State Commanders Council, the California Association of the County Veterans Service Officers, the Military Officers Association of America, the California Council of Chapters of the Military Officers Association of America, and I have some clients here that will be testifying on their own. My name, Pete Conity. Sorry about that. After I told my witnesses, make sure you tell everybody your name. Sorry. It's New Year, we had a break,
That's what I said earlier today, but it's a similar situation, yes.
Okay, we all know what the purpose of this bill is. It's because a fundamentalist church is opposed to homosexuality, and they've chosen to picket the funerals of the men and women who are killed defending our country, who are sent overseas by our country. However, in order to comply with the law, this bill is content neutral. And this bill also deals with, and I know the author, who's modest, has read the entire Supreme Court decision on this case before he brought the original bill forward. And I believe that at least 46 other states have adopted this legislation in some form or fashion. As a matter of fact, several of them are mentioned in the analysis. So since you've heard this bill before, the Supreme Court has ruled that, that there can be reasonable restrictions on the time, the place, and the manner restrictions. So we're not banning the protest. We are by this bill, we're joining 46 other states in putting reasonable time, place, and manner restriction. Time, funeral of a deceased member of the military. Place, at a cemetery where he is being buried. And the manner, protesting something that fallen soldier had nothing to do with. So I would respectfully ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I'm honored to be here this morning. My name is Don Harper. I'm representing the American Legion in California. We have close to 1,600 posts throughout California and a membership of 135,000 members in California. So I come here today representing the American Legion, strongly supporting this bill and the modifications in the bill. Quickly, the picketing of funeral causes emotional disturbances and stress to grieving families who participate in the funerals. Myself lost a brother because of wounds in Vietnam, and I remember coming back and attending his funeral service. There was not any picketing going around at that time, but as a family member, that would have hurt me horribly and carried a heavy heart with me throughout the rest of my life. And so, in summary, the Legion and I support the modifications in this bill. Thank you.
Good morning and Happy New Year. My name is Lorraine Ploss. I'm the American Veterans Legislative Chair for the Department of California. And AMVETS, without repeating, is the third largest group in California and throughout the United States for nonprofit veterans. I'm here with a dual purpose today, and of course we're a sponsor of the bill. And as a U.S. Army Vietnam veteran myself, and having done honors for the burial of veterans over the years, I've watched the distance from the front gate up to where you're burying an individual, and it's very tough to watch this. The chanting and the not so peaceful protest is approaching. And as a veteran, I would like to see this really considered carefully. As a legislative chair, a person who has served their country and deserves the right to burial with respect and privacy, I deserve that right. As a legislative chair, I have to admit that if you've ever attended this funeral, that distance is just not enough for a respectful burial. So I ask today for your aye vote in this minimum. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ken Holeyby. I'm the Legislative Chair for the Vietnam Veterans of America. We swore an oath when we joined the military to defend the Constitution of the United States. We believe we strongly believe in the right to peaceably assembly. And we believe that the right of the mourners at a funeral should be granted the same right of peaceable assembly as those wishing to protest. I ask for your support on this bill. Thank you.
My name is Stephanie Racino,
and I'm on the state legislative committee with Disabled American Veterans. I won't insult your intelligence by going through all the constitutional issues and what you've heard before, but I'd like to speak to you of something I know really well, and that's I'm a mother and I'm a grandmother. The people being lost are our sons and our daughters, our husbands, our wives, our brothers and sisters. Who has more of a right to privacy and peace? The soldier who defends every constitutional right we have, or those who have a beef and are trying to make a political statement, purposely inflicting severe emotional distress. A funeral is the highest stress that you can possibly get. Why are we giving them these extra rights? I'd like to see California lead. Don't go for this minimal 500 or 1,000. Let us bury our honored dead in peace and quiet and respect the family members. Nobody here is objecting to their rights to free speech. The person just there has died for them. If you want to do it, 1 hour with 1,000 feet, that's way too liberal. It's about time California says, you know what, we really do honor and respect the young men and women who are serving us. And let us give them a final dignity. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome back. This is Lieutenant Wayne Billowood on behalf of Los Angeles County Sheriff Lee Baca. For all the aforementioned reasons, we urge your support for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others in support of the bill? Are there speakers in opposition to the bill? I don't think your mic is on.
I'll try that again. Good morning, members and Chairman, Madam Chairwoman, and members. Happy New Year. Francisco Labaca on behalf of the American Civil Liberties Union. We are again in opposition to the legislation. As the senator, good senator, indicate, the committee has seen a very similar bill in the past. As the senator indicated, the governor vetoed it because, among other things, the bill failed to comport with Supreme Court decisions. Unfortunately, this bill continues to suffer from the same deficiencies. First, we must say that we agree with the proponents that the views of the group that inspire the bill are particularly offensive and hateful, and it's precisely for those reasons that we must oppose the legislation, because the First Amendment, above all, protects peaceful speech that the rest of us don't like. Your analysis goes into great detail in terms of the concerns, in terms of the constitutional concerns of the bill. I won't go into great detail, but briefly, the bill remains content-based and not narrowly tailored. It doesn't prohibit all peaceful picketing within an hour of funeral, just those targeted at a funeral. That's just one example. It doesn't prohibit counter demonstrations of those individuals who were picketing against expressing their views within the hour period. Secondly, it's not narrowly tailored. The distance limitations are nowhere near what the Supreme Court has upheld in other other kind of situations. The bottom line is that peaceful picketing should not be made a crime. Existing California law already makes it a crime to disturb or interfere with funerals. This year, we urge you to hold the bill in committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually do have a question, Mr. Labaca. Where in existing California law does it say that?
Penal Code 594.5.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from members of the committee?
Member Chair.
Oh, Senator Anderson.
I was a co-author last time. I'd like to be added as a co-author again. Free speech should not be used as a weapon to disrupt the grieving's ability to honor their loved ones in our military heroes. And I'm happy and proud to be a co-author on this bill. Thank you for bringing it forward, and I'd like to move the bill at this time.
Okay, the bill has been moved. Any other questions or comments? I have to say, as you know, Senator Liu, I wasn't able to vote for the bill before. And this is one of the hardest issues I've ever faced because of the fact that I do so greatly honor and appreciate what our forces are doing for us every day, these young men and women, some not so young, that are putting their lives on the line for these very civil liberties, for ensuring that this is one of the few places on the face of the earth where people who most of us, many of us profoundly disagree with, are able to act. And I remember growing up with the whole business of the Nazis and whether they could march in Skokie, Illinois. And one can agree, and I do, that this speech is abhorrent and that it is cruel. Really, it's akin to many other kinds of picketing that have been going on by some extreme conservative right-wing, I don't know what you want to call them, forces in our society, often around issues of sexuality, but around other things as well. And it's horrifying and despicable. I agree with you. But I do know that on the constitutional issues, I actually wasn't aware of the point that Mr. Labacco raised, that there are cases pending before the Supreme Court now. The only case that has been upheld in lower court that I know about is one that had a 300-foot exemption, not 500. But that isn't the issue. The issue is how we feel about this. I understand that. And that 3 other cases have been thrown out by the Supreme Court. So we're talking about a matter that is under litigation right now in the country. And the question would be, does California want to join that? And what would we have to add at this point in time? But I do feel that however difficult it is, the fact that our troops are fighting for these civil liberties that are the freedom of expression, the First Amendment, the things that make us unique. And that also, I appreciate the desire to make a statement, and I would join in any way in making a statement. But truly, the best way to honor our veterans is to take care of them when they get back, and to try to make sure that they get the care that they need and they get the supportive systems to integrate them. Sometimes they're traumatized, as we know, they're physically wounded, but to give them those supports. So it is with a heavy heart, but I can't support your bill today, but it did very well last time, so we'll see.
I have a question.
Senator Harman.
Senator Liu, in the bill at page 3, line 22, more or less, talks about the 500-foot limit. I was wondering, how is that measured? Is it, in the case of a cemetery, for instance, is it measured from the actual site of the grave of the deceased person, or is it measured from the boundary lines of the cemetery or the gate where you drive into the cemetery? What is the start and end point, if you know?
Right, so it would be the burial site, but we can clarify that further to be very specific exactly what that boundary would be.
Well, it might help because, then it goes on to say within the 500 feet, the burial site, then also mortuary or place of worship. So, some, particularly churches, have very large parking lots. Does it start at the church's property boundary or the church's front door? Or you might want to think about.
Happy to clarify that, and we can tighten it.
Where that is. Okay. Thank you very much. It's a good bill. Of course, I'm very much supportive of it. In fact, if it's appropriate, Madam Chair, I'd like to move the bill.
Yeah, I believe Senator Anderson did, but but we appreciate the thought. And I just want to thank staff for pointing that out. Thank you. Madam Secretary, you read the roll.
Hancock?
No.
Hancock, no. Anderson? Calderon? Harmon? Harmon, aye. Lou?
Aye.
Lou, aye. Price?
Aye.
Price, aye. Steinberg?
The bill is on call? Yes. That bill is on call, Senator Lou. Thank you. Oh, Senator De Leon. Okay, we need Senator De Leon or Senator Lamalfa. Will the sergeants call the absent authors, please? We're going to have a 10-minute recess. Both of our other authors are voting or chairing and finishing up their committees. So we'll reconvene at quarter of 11. Let's see if people are out in the mall or whatever. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's a great idea. All right. Before Senator De Leon begins, we're going to lift the call on some of the bills we've already heard, since there were some senators that were absent during the vote. Madam Secretary, we could start at the top and go down all the bills that were heard. Yes, please. Say how the chair voted and the vice chair.
Chair voted aye. Vice Chair aye. Absent Calderon and Steinberg.
Okay. 5-0. All right. Well, we'll keep that. We'll keep that on call for Senator Steinberg.
Just the first one.
Oh, he can add on, so we'll close the roll.
Okay.
The motion passes 5-0. Okay. SB 313.
Okay. Do pass as amended. Chair voted no. Vice Chair absent. Anderson, aye. Calderon, absent. Steinberg, absent.
Okay, we will leave that bill on call. SB 329 was held in committee pursuant to a hearing that we will have on the subject matter of DNA and forensic laboratories. Item 6, SB 661, Blue, crime picketing.
Yes, the action is due pass to appropriations. Chair voted no. Anderson? Anderson, aye. Calderon, absent. Steinberg, absent.
Okay, that motion carries. That bill is out.
Out.
Yes.
4-1.
And yep. So that concludes the adding on, and Senator De Leon. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to you and to all. Madam Chair, as well as Mr. Vice Chair Anderson, as well as Senators, thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Joint Resolution number 10. This resolution urges the President of the United States as well as the Congress to pursue a comprehensive approach to address the illegal trafficking of U.S. firearms and ammunition to Mexico, as well as other Central American nations such as Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. Although California is not one of the top so-called source states of illegal firearms that are being trafficked due to our strict gun control laws, our freeways and highways are being used to smuggle high-powered assault weapons and ammunition into Mexico. Thousands of families on both sides of the border have lost loved ones due to gun violence. And I've heard some very horrific stories from constituents about family members that have been terrorized by heavily armed cartels. Last October, the Senate Committee on Immigration and the Economy heard extensive testimony on this subject, and the consensus among the state and local law enforcement officials in California, as well as the Chief of Police Liaison from Tijuana, Baja California, is that in addition to the need for more resources to shore up operations and collaboration on the front lines, stronger federal laws need to be part of the solution. This is because the rise in trafficking is being facilitated by the weak patchwork of gun and ammunition control laws in other border states across the country. For example, and chiefly Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, as well as Nevada. Senate Joint Resolution number 10 calls for a comprehensive approach that includes the reenactment of the federal assault weapons ban, a ban on high-capacity magazines, a stronger federal authority to crack down on corrupt gun dealers, the extension of the Brady gun background checks to all gun sales, including gun shows, and the maintenance of firearm purchase records to assist law enforcement in solving gun crimes. I believe California should advocate for all of these reforms at the federal level. With me here to testify in support are representatives from the Brady campaign, as well as the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. We have a few other colleagues, our advocates also too, who will be testifying their support in this for this measure. Madam Chair, Senators, as well as Mr. Vice Chair Anderson, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Witnesses in support.
Good morning. Ben Van Houten on behalf of Legal Committee Against Violence. I want to thank the Senator for bringing this important resolution. The United States is now exporting its gun violence problem to Mexico. And the evidence is conclusive on this, that California's strong laws are working and that the weak laws in other states, especially states along the border, are creating a gun violence epidemic. On some level, though, the greater tragedy is that we know what we need to do. We know the steps that the federal government needs to take in terms of new laws, new and increased enforcement strategies to combat this epidemic. And I think it's important that California show leadership, just as it has with its gun laws, show leadership in urging the federal government to take stronger action on this issue. Thank you.
Good morning. Karen Arnson, representing the California chapters of the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. We just want to add that we also agree that it's important that California take a leadership role on this issue. Illegal gun trafficking is a huge problem both internationally and domestically. The latest ATF firearms tracing report for California identifies the top source states from which guns are trafficked into California. The top 3 are Arizona, Nevada, and Texas, all having weak to non-existent gun laws. If Congress and the President do what this resolution is asking, it will not only save lives in Mexico, but also in California. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is John Lindsay. I speak on behalf of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, which is a national interfaith organization founded in 1915. Almost anyone in this room can go out today and catch a flight from Sacramento to Phoenix. There's one that leaves at 12:30. And drive half an hour to Lone Wolf Trading in Glendale, buy 20 AK-47s, and walk out of the store. These are military-grade weapons. But it's no problem. It's all legal. You could then hand them to a contact, get paid maybe $1,000 for your trouble, and be back here this evening. This actually happened at Lone Wolf Trading last year. Now, I'm not saying that any of you did this. Lone Wolf is not a rogue gun dealer. It is one of more than 7,000 licensed firearm dealers near the U.S.-Mexico border where this could occur. If you are the contact receiving these weapons, you can walk over the bridge from El Paso to Ciudad Juarez. I've done it during the past year, and no one from the United States or Mexico even checked my ID going in that direction. From the Rio Grande Valley in Texas alone, there are more than 21,000 trucks and cars crossing over the border into Mexico every day, 365 days a year. In the context of a border that is structurally porous for goods going from the United States to Mexico, the insistence on a federally unregulated market for military weapons extends the most radical interpretation of our Second Amendment into Mexico. But Mexico has no Second Amendment. It is illegal for Mexicans to own firearms unless they are granted a very restricted license. So unless Mexicans become criminals, they cannot defend themselves using guns, as gun industry advocates urge people to do in the United States, even if such a strategy were sensible. The vast majority of Mexicans are thus at the mercy of militarily armed gunmen who, evidence shows, have no mercy at all. So what is happening in Mexico? There have been more than 50,000 Mexicans killed since 2006, and 95% of these murders have remained in impunity. There is plenty of blame to go around for this tragedy. You can blame the triggermen who respond badly to poverty. Blame the drug traffickers running their organizations. Blame drug users whose money funds the guns. Blame drug prohibition because there is no way to peacefully redress disagreements in an illegal industry. Blame the bankers who have processed billions of dollars. Blame the broken judicial system in Mexico. Blame the Mexican police on the take. Blame the gun smugglers. Or blame the woman working in a maquila plant who takes a bus home late in the evening. Blame the activists challenging the brutal takeover of their communities. Blame the journalists investigating violence in their cities. Blame the cops who didn't bow to organized crime. Blame the teenagers at a party where gunmen raided and began shooting. In this way, we blame anyone, even the victims of violence, except ourselves. And this blaming serves to evade any responsibility, any contribution to changing this situation. It doesn't have to be this way. Policy can be made proportional to the risks and privileges of diverse populations. This resolution calls on the federal government to enact such a policy, and our values compel us to support this call. We urge you to do the same.
Hi. My name's Kirsten Mahler, and I speak as the founding director of Global Exchange, a California-based human rights organization that's worked closely with Mexican democracy and human rights movement since 1994. We've come today to testify on this measure to control firearms trafficking because we've been convinced by our Mexican friends and colleagues that loose regulation of firearms in this country facilitates a massive illegal weapons flow to the south that in turn helps to fuel a bloody conflict that has resulted in at least 50,000 Mexicans' deaths since the end of 2006. Senator De Leon's SJR 10 resolution brings needed attention to this too often ignored issue while suggesting practical measures to reduce weapons smuggling. As SJR 10 documents, Mexico has experienced a terrifying spiral of violence following an escalation of the war for drug prohibition by President Felipe Calderón at the end of 2006. The underlying causes of the war and for the spiking body count are complex and controversial, but there is broad consensus across most sectors in Mexico that easy access to weaponry smuggled from the United States is a major contributing factor in the growing mayhem. SJR 10 correctly identifies the urgent need for action at the federal level by Congress and the President to cooperate in developing a comprehensive limit on the trafficking of weapons and ammunition into Mexico. In 2012, Alianza Cívica, a group we work with called Civic Alliance, traditionally Mexico's premier election observation and electoral watchdog organization, asked us and other human rights organizations to join them in a Mexican-led petition campaign that echoes the concerns voiced in SJR 10 in terms of limiting the import of assault weapons to the United States and providing far stricter enforcement powers to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. This campaign against weapons smuggling has been given full and explicit support by Javier Cecilia, the renowned Mexican poet, who, along with other victims of Mexico's violence, is leading a massive peace movement he helped found after his son was murdered, along with 6 other young friends, in March of last year. In recent months, even leaders of this peace movement have been targeted. On November 28th, Nepomuceno Moreno Núñez, a prominent movement activist, was gunned down in his hometown of Hermosillo, Sonora, in northwestern Mexico. His offense? Being persistent in seeking justice in this case of his 18-year-old son, Jorge Mario Moreno León, who was kidnapped and disappeared in July of 2010. California can send an important message to Washington with the passage of SJR 10. I urge you to support this important resolution.
Good morning. Lieutenant Wayne Billowit on behalf of Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. We, too, support this resolution. And just to give you some background, the Sheriff's Department, as well as other law enforcement agencies throughout the country, are trying to work with Congress and the President on trying to address this issue. And I think this resolution goes a long way in backing that position up. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other speakers in support of the measure? Are there speakers in opposition? Please come forward.
Madam Chair and members, in testifying about this issue, I want you to know that I have a significant portion of my family that lives in Mexico. I have the rich heritage of having parents who immigrated to the United States and became citizens, and gave me the blessing of being born here and being a citizen of the United States. This issue is extremely important and emotional to us. Now, with regards to this resolution, there are few opportunities I've had in this legislature to hit a softball over the fence. One of the testifiers earlier failed to mention that one of the largest violators of or perpetrators of sending guns to Mexico was the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in their Fast and Furious gun walker, gun runner program that has been going on not only in Arizona, but now we're learning that they've had it going on in other places, extending to Texas and Florida and other border states. Let me point out a couple of facts to you that you may support this issue, but you cannot change the facts. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms has not arrested any of the dealers on the border for illegally trafficking guns or transporting guns illegally. As a matter of fact, in the investigation that's going on in Congress right now, They're finding the dealers, virtually 100% of the dealers complied with the law and contacted law enforcement officials. When they complied with existing federal law and said, we think that the purchasers of these firearms are potential drug cartel people, straw purchasers. And it was the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms who said, let them sell the guns, and we will follow them. And then they took them, they ended up in Mexico. And we know that there are hundreds of Mexican citizens. And we don't know how many American citizens have been victims of these guns. The purpose for this program is now starting to come out. One of the purposes was in order to encourage Congress to come up with stronger gun control laws. To me, amazingly crazy. They lost control of these laws. We have one, probably two American law enforcement officers who have lost their lives because of this program. When we take a look and examine the photographs of all of the confiscated firearms that the Mexican government comes up with, and they lay them all out and they show them, they are fully automatic M4, AR-15 machine guns, fully automatic AK-47s, grenade launchers, bazookas, armor-piercing rocket propelled launchers and stuff like that. Weapons that are not sold to the public in the United States, not generally. Those that are to licensed purchasers in the United States, they are the most controlled people in the world. And there's no evidence that there's any sort of a problem with these people. The evidence shows that it isn't the American law-abiding citizens who are trafficking guns down to Mexico. These drug cartels are purchasing firearms from corrupt military officials in other countries. They're the ones who can provide these Russian-made and Chinese-made fully automatic firearms that are showing up in these crimes. It is not an American problem. It is a problem that will not be solved by further restricting the rights, not the privilege, but the rights of American citizens. And to ask the federal government to sponsor more gun controls when they are, the truth will show, they are at fault for this disastrous program. The Mexican government officials are even calling for American officials. Ma'am?
We have a 2-minute limit. Thank you. Thank you. I think we understand what you're saying.
All right. Well, please.
And you didn't give us your name again.
My name is Sam Paredes, Executive Director of Gun Owners of California, proud American citizen whose family comes from Mexico. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Tom Patterson, representing California Rifle and Pistol Association. Just like to take the opportunity to quickly point out some of the discussion by one of the earlier witnesses that testified in favor pointed out that there had been illegal activity where someone was purchasing guns in Arizona, taking them across the border. If that occurs, that's actually a violation of law right now, violation of both federal and state law, and could be prosecuted immediately without any further discussion. Secondly, the reenactment of the so-called assault weapons law is problematic in that these firearms are merely self-loading firearms that have features that are prohibited, whether it's a bayonet lug or some other feature, and that's how they were designed, and had nothing to do with the actual function of the firearm. So to make these types of distinctions, although they may sound good, they're really not very helpful. The real issue is how do you address the problem, how do you address crime, and you address it by enforcing the law, and you address it by securing the border, and you can do that with existing laws. For that reason, we urge your no vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Ed Ward with the National Rifle Association. I want to go through very quickly some of the points that we have a problem with in what the Senator is talking about. None of us have a problem, of course, with cracking down on illegal gun smuggling. That's something that all of us agree and believe in. But I think the thing you need to pay attention to is the story that's evolving right now in front of all of us in the United States federal government. And that's the operation of Fast and Furious, where thousands of guns were allowed to walk across the border, where the gun dealers were the ones who called the federal ATF and said, this guy's come in and wanted to buy a whole bunch of guns. I don't want to sell him the guns. when the federal ATF agent called the dealer back and said, we want you to not only sell the guns you have in the store, but to order more guns and give them more guns and let them walk across the border. So the problem we have with the problematic and part of the resolution is that there's a political attempt here to isolate dealers and blame dealers and say corrupt, unscrupulous firearms dealers. Well, the problem is when you have a firearms dealer who calls the federal government in and shows them somebody that he has outlined for them that is a problem, and then the federal agents tell them, oh no, don't just sell them the guns you have in the store, order more and give them more guns. That's not a problem with the Second Amendment. That's not a problem with firearms dealers being regulated by the federal government. That is a problem with people who are out of control. As more and more of these hearings happen on Fast and Furious, you're going to be shocked and amazed of the things that happened by federal agents. And this story is long from being finished. And this story is going to keep unraveling. And as they unravel this, and as federal agents come forward who are disgusted with what they were told to do by the people up in the echelons of the bureaucracy, when you have federal agents who go and beg their supervisors not to let guns walk across the border. If you watch the hearings in Washington, D.C., one federal agent was calling on the radio. He says, I'm here. I'm watching the illegal sales go down. They're ready to take these guns across the border. For God's sakes, let me stop these guns from leaving the country. The federal agent was told to stop and not do anything. And he says all the years of federal prosecution, this firearms law enforcement officer said, he says, in all my years in New Jersey, New York, and every place he'd worked, they had never allowed guns to, quote, walk away from criminals so they couldn't track them. Yet here in this instance, this administration did. When you peel back, when you start peeling this back and they start peeling back the orders that have come down from the bureaucracy, these are the federal officers who are trying to get this to stop. So to come forward and say that the problem is we have too much rights in the United States, that those of us in the United States have too much freedom, and you should restrict our freedom to stop a problem, an international problem. And when you look at the gun tracing that's gone on, the federal agencies, many of the guns that are traced haven't come from the United States. They're military firearms. Grenade launchers. When you read the report, you'll see that the grenades, rocket launchers, and things like that are coming forward. That has nothing to do with us. So we don't disapprove of what Senator Dino has talked about as far as coordinating law enforcement activities, cracking down on trafficking. That's a common sense approach to what we should do. Well, where we're offended is that he's calling upon the federal government to again restrict our rights, coming after us, spend precious law enforcement resources to come after those of us who are not a problem. But I caution you that as this issue moves forward and more of the Fast and Furious hearings take place in Washington, D.C., you're going to be shocked to see what's happening. And this resolution doesn't deal with that. So for those reasons, we don't oppose the law enforcement aspect. We oppose reinstatement of the gun prohibitions, Madam Chair. For those reasons, we oppose the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there others in opposition? Seeing and hearing none, are there questions or comments from members of the committee?
I have just a quick comment. You know, it'd be a lot easier for me to support this if the author had targeted federal-sponsored gun trafficking. If we had focused in on the ATF and what they did in the Fast and Furious, but to use what they did to go after law-abiding citizens makes no sense to me. You know, the first time that assault bans went through, one of our local legislators voted for it. And then she had to go back and ask for amendments because it turns out that one of her constituents was a 16-year-old who was a Olympic shooter, and her pistol fell under that. Her Olympic pistol fell under that ban. So I'm reluctant to rush out real quick to try to put a fix on something that we don't even know where the real problem's coming from when we have the Obama administration saying that they allowed this to happen. I want to give Obama an opportunity to fix the problem first before I move forward on anything else. Until we can get the federal government to stop moving guns illegally, I don't see how we can go after citizens. So for that reason, I won't be supporting you today.
Okay. If there are no other questions or comments, Senator De Leon, would you like to respond to some of the comments?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, members, as well as Vice Chair Anderson. I can appreciate the passion and the enthusiasm the opposition has with regards to trying to reach its objective in defeating Senate Joint Resolution Number 10. Let me touch upon a couple components of the arguments that were put forth just a second ago. Number one, with regards to the Fast and Furious program, the ATS program, I think there's a consensus largely that it was a debacle. That component of the Fast and Furious is a very small component because it's more a symptom than the disease. According to the Woodrow Wilson Institute Woodrow Wilson International Center Transborder Institute at the University of San Diego, 80,000 high-powered assault weapons were seized in Mexico in the past 2 years. Out of the 80,000 high-powered assault weapons that were seized in Mexico, 80% originated in the United States. The other 20%, this is empirical data from the Woodrow Wilson International Institute. The other 20% was made a reference to whether the Russians, whether the Chinese, or whether other Eastern Bloc countries on the black market who are covertly selling high-powered assault weapons to nefarious individuals throughout the world. And if drug cartels in Mexico or throughout the Western Hemisphere has secured high-powered assault weapons through those venues, then that's a reality. But 80% of the high-powered assault weapons originated from the United States, specifically Nevada, Texas, and Arizona. Where California comes into place, when we had our hearing a few months ago, we had the California Highway Patrol, we had the sheriff from San Diego County, as well as Los Angeles County, and we had the Department of Justice of the state of California. Highway 80, when one goes skiing to Squaw Valley, when one goes to North Star, when you go to Truckee, if you want to spend the summer hiking, Highway 80 coming westward is an interstate that's heavily used for gun traffickers. Coming in from Reno, Highway 80 down to 5 South, going 5 South. Highway number 10 from Arizona, Highway Patrol has clearly stated in testimony, we have it, and we have the transcripts right now. Highway 10 is highly trafficked corridor for high smuggling arms coming in from the 10 freeway down 5 South. Las Vegas, Nevada. Interstate 15 South, going down 15 South straight to San Isidro to Tijuana. It's highly used to traffic high-powered assault weapons. You can, in the state of Nevada, today, go to any gun store you like, purchase all the high-powered assault weapons, no questions asked, no background check, no federal instant background check conducted by the FBI. You can do so. So when high-powered assault weapons are purchased, either in Texas, Arizona, or Nevada, especially Nevada and Arizona, California is highways are being utilized to traffic these arms. Now, I find quite ironic, and I don't want to use Fast and Furious as sort of the. We've got to be very careful and put this in context, 'cause I don't want to deviate from the main problem. I don't want to use Fast and Furious as the smoke screen, because it's rather symptom than the disease. We have 8,479 gun stores. Not in the United States, not in the Southwest region, 8,479 gun stores on the border alone, on our side, right on the border. So when you have straw purchasers who have the clear intent to purchase a high-powered assault weapon that's going to a drug cartel in Mexico, they know exactly what's happening. Now, we're not going after the people of the United States of California. We recognize the Second Amendment of the Constitution, the right to bear arms. Now, I know folks agree or don't agree, but this doesn't do nothing against the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. It sends a very clear message to the federal government that we have to have a very comprehensive plan as we deal with the gun violence, because the high-powered assault weapons that are being utilized and illegally trafficked into Mexico and into Central America are the fuel that feeds the violence that's taking place right now as we speak in Mexico. We have teachers, we have judges, we have police officers, we have innocent children who are being massacred on the streets. And therefore, that's why I put forth Senate Joint Resolution number 10 for your review, Madam Chair, as well as, Mr. Vice Chair, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, is there a motion on the bill? It's been moved by Senator Price. Please read the roll.
Hancock?
Aye.
Hancock, aye. Anderson?
No.
Anderson, no. Calderon? Harmon?
No.
Harmon, no. Liu? Price?
Aye.
Price, aye. Steinberg?
Okay, that bill is on call.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr.
Our last bill of the day, Senator LaMalfa. SB 387. This is a ROCA bill. It's been heard in the committee before. Senator LaMalfa has indicated he would like a vote on the bill. He's coming. Okay. To the committee. As I was saying, Senator LaMalfa is going to present his bill. He knows that it is a ROCA bill. We have heard it before. He would like to have a vote on the bill, and we'll present the bill again.
Okay, thank you again for that. Sorry about the delay of many things going today, but Madam Chair, members, we're presenting SB 387 called the Lacey Law, which would increase the statute of limitations from 3 years to 6 on a hit-and-run accident when there is death or bodily injury. The bill is named the Lacey Law after Josh Lacey, who was a high school sophomore who was struck and killed by a vehicle while waiting for a school bus. The suspects fled the scene after that. The majority of the 3-year statute of limitation was spent locating the suspects. By the time they were located, the DA couldn't charge the suspects with many of the crimes, including causing bodily injury, driving under the influence, accessory to the hit and run, and concealment, which they actually concealed the car by burying it. This currently is the only method of killing, a homicide, that can give a suspect the ability to circumvent punishment through the evasion of law enforcement. This law would give law enforcement more time to find and charge a suspect. So for these reasons, I would respectfully ask that this committee consider moving this bill.
Thank you. Witnesses in support.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. Happy New Year. Marty Varanakar on behalf of the California District Attorneys Association. We're in support of this measure, and I would like to add a personal anecdote that's very similar. It happened in my neighborhood. We knew the family. A young woman was on her way home from work late in the evening. Her boyfriend had picked her up. Another driver had made a left turn and aggressively forced her off the road. The car ended up, she hit a telephone pole, killed her, and her boyfriend was in a coma for many months. It was only several years later that the passenger in the perpetrator's vehicle decided he had a change of heart. Unfortunately, he was in jail. And so his testimony that the other person was the driver had to be independently corroborated. And by the time that law enforcement was able to put that together, the statute had run. We're talking about a crime here whose gravamen is evasion, evading responsibility for this type of accident. and we need some additional time to be able to solve these crimes. And for that reason and others, we're in support of the measure. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. Gus Corey here on behalf of the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors. I don't want to be repetitive. I think Mr. LaMalfa and Marty made most of my points, but I do want to add that we do very much sympathize and understand the challenges that you're facing with overcrowding in our prisons, but we would ask you to consider the nature of the crime. As Marty mentioned, this is about evasion. It's difficult to find the perpetrators. Sometimes you find them through other acts that they commit in order to get the evidence. And so we're not talking about low-level offenders. We're talking about murder. So we would ask you to reconsider and vote aye on the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other speakers in support of the bill? Are there speakers in opposition to the bill? Please come forward.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. Ignacio Hernandez on behalf of the California Attorneys for Criminal Justice Statewide Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys. We are opposed to the bill as it's currently drafted. The very nature of these offenses, fleeing after hit and run, we're dealing with evidence that is available immediately, usually identifying the vehicle and also identifying the license plate. That's the only physical evidence really that pertains to these types of offenses. So if we don't have, so normally we will be able to track down who the owner is of the vehicle and start the investigation there. If you don't have the description, if you don't have the license plate number immediately, nothing's really going to change unless you have a very unusual situation, as was described today, where somebody decides to confess or somebody decides to point the finger at someone else. That's very rare when that occurs. The reason why we have the statute of limitations is to ensure that evidence doesn't go cold and to ensure that in those situations where someone is wrongfully accused, he or she can actually defend him or herself. When we're dealing with an offense, would normally the defense is an alibi. It wasn't you. You weren't driving. The longer, the more time that we have passed, the harder it is to put up a defense. I had a case many years ago, very similar, where they tried to place it. It was within the statute of limitations, but we had to establish that he was not there. It was not him. We had to get receipts from stores. We had to go track down old friends who remembered him that day. It's very, very difficult, even within the 3-year window. 6 years would be nearly impossible. We were able to do it. It took 2 years, a lot of money, a lot of time. We were able to establish his innocence. The problem with this is that while the results of the offense are tragic, the evidence related to the offense are immediate. And so if you have the evidence immediately, extending the statute of limitations will either, one, just capture somebody who's innocent but can't establish an alibi, or two, is going to allow law enforcement to wait even longer to start pursuing this. Again, this is very rare. And I'll remind you, somebody can waive the statute of limitations if someone feels that guilty and wants to admit that they committed an offense. Try to persuade them to waive the statute of limitations. That's going to be just as rare as somebody confessing many years later. For those reasons, we're opposed, and thank you for allowing me the time to speak.
Thank you.
Margaret Laffin on behalf of Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, and for all of the stated reasons and also the reasons stated in the letter that Carol Strickland wrote, we also oppose this bill.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from members of the committee? Senator Harman.
Madam Chair, I wanted to ask you a question about the ROCA policy. I thought that the committee's ROCA policy dealt with the creation of a new type of felony that would then potentially result in people getting convicted and going to our prisons and exacerbating the overcrowding situation. But this is not creating, this bill of Senator LaMalfa's seems to me not creating a new felony, already on the books, felony hit and run. It's simply extending the time that the prosecutor has to prosecute the case. And as the representative from the District Attorneys Association indicated, these cases almost by definition deal with evasion. Somebody's committed the crime, they took off, they can't find them. So why is this a ROCA case?
Well, traditionally, Senator Harman, ROCA has meant expanding the scope of a felony or adding on to a sentence or creating a new felony. But
so that's three reasons. Two of them are not applicable here, and I did hear you say extending.
The test is. Pardon? Well, that's what I thought I said. That if you add scope so that you are likely or can convict more people in a way that you could not previously, it adds to the to our prison population at a time when we are now 164% over capacity, and even if we succeed in meeting the demands of the U.S. Supreme Court, we will be 130% over capacity. And we simply can't do this in the absence, in my view, of a look at all our sentencing so that we are not simply having a revolving door here, sending a number of people back to county jail, and then filling up those beds.
I understand. Let me ask one more question. Is our ROCA policy written, or is it a discretionary decision that's made by a committee staff or yourself or whoever that, this bill's ROCA, this bill's not? Does an author know coming in that, well, this is going to be a ROCA bill?
Yeah, they do.
Is it in writing?
They do.
Have the guidelines in writing so that potential authors will know as they're drafting legislation?
Actually, the guidelines and the process are kind of restated virtually in every one of our analyses anyway. But it is not an official document. It is a directive from Senate leadership.
I understand that, and I get that. I'm not challenging that. What I am inquiring about is it seemed to me in the operation of this committee that it would be better to have these guidelines in writing so potential authors will know, well, this is going to be a ROCA case or not. And it seems to me like we're going to have this situation come up time and again, and I would like to encourage you to consider putting this policy into some kind of written form so that people could look at it and say, okay, because as I sit here, my analysis when I was looking at Senator LaMalfa's bill, it shouldn't be a ROCA bill. It's not creating a new felony. It's not extending anything. It's just saying, hey, if they got more time to look for the guilty person and have a trial on the merits and decide whether the person, I shouldn't have said guilty person, the alleged person.
Thank you.
And see. So with those thoughts, I will tell you that I cannot go along with this ROCA business.
Okay, and I think that it is a good idea for us to take the guidelines that we do have, the directive from leadership, and see if we can put it into guideline, perhaps more precise. But I do have to say, we discuss this with every author. And when we try to work with them to find a way around it, just like Senator Anderson and I are trying to work together around the issue of increased fines, which don't really work, but maybe there's something else we can do. So I think that authors are informed, and we truly try to be helpful on this, Senator Harman. But I take your admonishment to heart, and I'm going to work with the staff on it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Senator Price.
Thank you. I certainly am sympathetic to the concerns and the issue being raised by the author, and appreciate his attention to it. I'm just not comfortable though with the approach taken. I'm going to be voting no at this time, but hope that we can continue working on the issue.
Okay. Did anybody else? Senator Anderson, your mic is on.
Yes, Madam Chair. You did ask for a vote, so for that purpose I will move the bill. Also, I agree with Senator Harman. I don't think that this should fall under ROCA. You could flip it the other way, and you could say, well, if we really want to have ROCA work, we could give them 24 hours to find the offender, and then we wouldn't convict anybody. We're not talking about cases where a person's been scraped, or we're talking about murder, we're talking about fleeing a felony scene, and I just have difficulty. We're not changing the outcome of increasing the penalty. We're just allowing people to come to justice. So with that, I move the bill.
Okay. The bill has been moved. As I said, I am asking for a no vote. We're not dealing with the policy here. We're dealing with a strong sense that it would be absolutely counterproductive to worsen the state's current prison population overcrowding crisis.
Madam Chair, if I could...
The motion, by the way, would be due pass to appropriations.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Senator LaMalca.
Yeah, I just follow up. I appreciate I appreciate working with the chairman and the committee on this previously here, and I felt that some of Senator Harman's comments too to the scope. That's probably a debatable point, which makes me want to take my day in court here, so to speak, and with the way things are changing in the prison population here, that with realignment that we are seeing that decrease, and even one of the witnesses in opposition, this is a very rare thing, so impact on population is likely to be very, very minimal. So what I think about here is the victims in this case and others that would be similar, that they're going to feel like there's been a sense of justice, not merely because of an arbitrary timeline that has been put up in the past that, as we from time to time see, we need to revamp policies to reflect maybe a more cunning criminal. I mean, we had in this case an automobile that was buried, or another one could be dropped into the bottom of a lake. So we talked about evidence a while ago being a key element. Well, when the evidence is uncovered, we ought to have the ability to, within the scope of already existing level of felony, to bring that person to trial. And was mentioned, like, what about wrongful accusation? Well, again, that's what the trial process is for. If the evidence, the quality of the evidence, either to its length of time that it's been around is maybe not as good, then that'll be a discretion that the prosecutor is using as to how well he or she feels their case is going to go. The defense and the jury and the judge observing all that. So I think really the arguments against just really come down to the scope of where do you want to move the slide rule on the timeline. Senator Anderson, I think in partial jest, said 24 hours, or we have 3 years, or what we're looking at is for a longer period of time in 6 years. And since there hasn't been the opportunity to make amendments as things have gone this year, if the 6-year timeline is one that's seen as causing some discomfort for members of the committee, then we can talk about that if we want to move the bill along on something that revising that to a different period of time that's longer than the 3 we have now. So I'm open for that, but I appreciate, Madam Chair, your hearing and let me present today on this, and I would ask for a vote on this as we conclude. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator LaMalfa. Madam Secretary, please read the roll.
Due pass to appropriations. Hancock?
No.
Hancock, no. Anderson?
Aye.
Anderson, aye. Calderon? Harmon?
Aye.
Harmon, aye. Liu? Price? Steinberg?
That bill will be on call for Senator Steinberg. There was nobody else here. So thank you, Senator LaMalfa. And I do hope, actually, that we can all join together in a look at our sentencing, because in the end, we're going to have to keep that prison population down, and we need to make decisions about how we balance out a situation in which, when we continually create situations where more and more people will go to prison, we can't do successful realignment, and the state will go bankrupt. So.
Madam Chair,
Madam Chair.
Do you want to open the room for Senator Anderson?
I thought he voted on.
I think I voted for everything.
Yes, he did.
But, Madam Chair, your idea of putting it in writing,
Thank you.
I'd be very supportive of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good, good. I agree. So we do have a few add-ons. Madam Secretary, would you go through the bills and call the absent members who were not here?
SB 210 is out. SB 313.
No, you can skip that. It's only the pro tem on that.
Yeah, that one
Mhm.
is.
So you go all the way up to item 8. So you lift the call on item 8.
So we're lifting the call on item 8, which is SJR 10 by De Leon on firearms.
The action is be adopted. Chair voted aye. Vice Chair no. Calderon. Lou. Lou aye. Steinberg. 3-2.
Senator Steinberg has arrived.
Please, everybody sit down.
Don't take it personally. All right. Shall we review the roll?
So, start off with
Yes.
2? Oh, okay. Or 1.
No, one's out.
Okay. Agenda item 2, SB 313.
Hold on.
Current.
Give me just a second, please. Go ahead. I got it.
Steinberg.
No.
Steinberg, no.
Okay, that bill has failed passage.
Thank you.
2 to 4.
Item 4.
Item 4, SB 387. Absent members. Chair voted no. Vice Chair aye. Calderon, Lou, Price, Steinberg.
No.
Steinberg, no.
Okay, that bill fails.
2 to 2.
I would like to specifically add on SB 661.
661.
The Lou bill I'd like to add on as a. Like to add on as an aye.
Okay. Steinberg,
Please.
aye. Senate Bill 661. That's
And
5.
number 8. Number 7 was pulled. Oh, item
10.
Correct.
Okay. Item number 8, SJR 10. Steinberg.
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
Okay. The measure is adopted 5 to 2. No, 4 to 2. 4 to 2. That concludes the agenda. Thank you all very much. The committee meeting is adjourned.